Hey, everybody, welcome back to Contest Prep University. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Adam Atkinson. We're going to do another feature, so longer form conversation on the current state of coaching. And Adam, one of the reasons I wanted to bring this up is it seems like new clients that come on board with me after 25 plus years of coaching, they seem to obviously have some experience. They've generally worked with coaches in the past, but yet it's obvious to me that their experience is different than what they're going to encounter with me. And part of it is that they're coming on board into that coaching persona business model now, where I've lived through several evolutions of it. So I thought, one of the first things I wanted to discuss is just some of the differences, like why did the coaching industry start where it did, how it did, what it was like back then, and then we can draw some contrasts and maybe help people understand what they should expect. How do you know you have a good coach? But let's go all the way back to 1998 when I started writing for Natural Bodybuilding and Fitness. The internet was just getting started in that full capacity. Social media did not yet exist in any form. And I started writing about contest prep type topics. I had to fill content. I had magazines to write for. And because I was starting to do things differently, I'm the person who said, you shouldn't dehydrate. That's stupid. You're going to look bad. You shouldn't, take sodium out of your diet. Why would you do that? This is what the osmolarity of cells is like. And so I was so countercultural to what people were used to. It gained a lot of attention. People started inquiring, like, could you help me? Like, how do you figure this out? So I created that entire coaching model. Hey, you can hire me. You pay me this amount. I will help you get ready for a contest. Brand new concept at that time. And of course, now everybody in the world who's ever competed is, quote, a coach. But back then, it was entirely technocratic. And maybe that was just because of my personality. Here's what you do. Here's the play that you're going to run. Your food intake should be here. Do this. Don't do that. And because of the amount of clients I was receiving very quickly, I was working 18 hours a day, 6 days a week, doing nothing but contest prep. So I just kind of, I would say, devolved, not evolved, devolved into a once a week check-in. If you had some questions, of course, we'll communicate through that until it's time to check in next week. That has still remained as a core way to communicate, which is a little bit odd to me because people text, direct message, they want real-time communication. But it was certainly, this is the science, or this is my perception as a health scientist myself, as a pro bodybuilder myself, as somebody sorting through all of these misinformation points. We need to get people on the same page. And it was all about doing something appropriately. And I would say for the most part, that's still the core theme. When somebody hires you, they may have come from another coach. They didn't like the result. And so they think, hey, Adam's a great guy, seems to know a lot. His clients all do well. I'll hire him. He'll figure it out and he'll help me perfect this process even better. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's most people have a longer paper trail of having competed before. I also think, my experience level's greater than it was before too. So I have more high placing athletes seeking out my services now, than before.
Well, I remember. So when, first of all, you and I knew each other, we met because you were a coach kind of in my system and we were doing some mentorship work. But you quickly just came out of the gate and started eclipsing what I even thought the power of social media could bring to coaching. So, all of a sudden I'm seeing you post things and you have just thousands and thousands of responses, and you're constantly showing up at contests with 15 or 20 clients around you in photos. And, taking that step forward from where I began the journey in the late 90s to maybe 10 or 12 years later when you were hitting your stride, what do you think made the difference for you to gain some traction like that?
I think being new was part of that interest, right? Because when you're new, people want to try it and they're very interested in what I was doing. Also, I think I had a really good divide of that was kind of the time period where people were afraid to do macros. So I would almost get people in by doing it their way with a meal plan. And then whenever they wanted to cheat meal or refeed, I would teach them like just track your refeed macros, like, and you can eat anything you want. And when they found that that worked, I started doing it with the rest of the meals
Mm.
and slowly got them into macro tracking. They told their friends, and their friends were in disbelief that this worked. So I think the timing that I came in was really key. And also how, even though I was a macro coach, I was willing to, because everyone offered custom programming back then, but they either did macros or meal plans. And I was like, well, if it's truly custom, wouldn't you do both depending on what the athlete wants? And that's always been my motto is I always do offer a custom approach to athletes. And still to this day, I do macros and meal plans, even though I more so prefer macros. So I think that made a big difference. And then also, I did have some really good results out the gates and still do. So, many times athletes come to me and have a better appearance than they did, with other coaches who even charged more and made them track more senseless data for no reason, like made them track their steps the whole prep. And it comes down to experience. There's a lot of new coaches out there that charge $500 a month, but I would really look at the track record on, do they have any pros? Have they actually made somebody better for the stage? And, also, are they a dick or not? So I treat my people like humans. I think that's always the one trait they'll indefinitely keep me alive in the industry is I form a really good community with my athletes. We do daily Zoom calls Monday through Friday. I'm really accessible. So there's really no reason to fail or any possible way to fail if you follow everything in my camp.
Well, two of the things that stood out to me as I was watching your early success is you seem to specialize a bit. So I do want to talk about qualification and specialization. You were always surrounded by figure competitors and then bikini competitors, and that just seemed to be like, success begets success. As women see you do well with other women and they see clients of yours winning, then that brings them into your purview. But the other thing is, you, even from the beginning, you were just good. I would look at your clients and look at their results, look at their photos, and I'm like, he's just fucking nailing it every time. How is Adam doing that? And I know you're a coach who learned from me, and so, but still, like there is an intuitive nature to what we do as coaches, kind of the art form. And then there's the formal education, how much biology and physiology. And I've always told people you're kind of like Rain Man in that I would hear you quote things word for word that I might have said in a lecture or a video 10 years earlier. I'm like, wow, he really absorbs this stuff. But you know, going back to just the fact that you seem to have this innate ability to know how to bring people in to their best level. I see people also hire high level, high name coaches, and then I see their results, and I'm like, the coach just doesn't know what they're doing. They're just not good. How do you think you stay current, and what did you do to really kind of gain that command of the craft?
I think that I had an eye for it right out the gates. I will say this, I got to see one of the most extreme real-time peaking scenarios when you showed me what you did with Martin Daniels. It was like I could not unsee that. You showed me a picture of a guy who I thought looked absolutely perfect. And then I think you had him send you photos like, an hour later, and the changes you made to him. And you just kind of gave me this smirk because I was blown away. And I was like, wow, he looks better. And you said just because he looked good doesn't mean he can't look better. And I was like, holy shit, that's like a major life lesson right there. And I think having the ability to see somebody with so much muscle tissue gave it a really extreme change. With smaller people, when you start out as an amateur, it is hard to see those changes because they are going to be more minute. So I feel like I got a fast pass to success by seeing such an extreme change on an athlete that I kind of knew what was possible. So, with doing that, it just really comes down to developing an eye. I am huge on having my light with me backstage to look at people because that light makes a really consistent result for how I'm visualizing my clients. So if I'm there at this show, like we're just not going to miss, and if I've had you a while too, it comes down to communication. And I also too, I've had mistakes, and I didn't stop because I made a mistake or something like that. I think a lot of coaches are just like, I'm not good at this. And you're not going to be at the very beginning, and you have to be realistic to yourself. And you also have to be honest with your clients if you are newer. And there's definitely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, there are a couple points that you mentioned that I'm going to cover that I've got in my notes here, but one of the things you just said there, mentioning being on site, I want to get to in a second as a transition. But I've also seen really highly educated coaches, masters and PhDs in nutrition and exercise science, who just aren't good. Like they don't have that artful side or that interpretive ability to just know where people are. So that is something you have to learn, even if you have some good formal physiological education. But then I also see people who are still just stuck as one trick ponies. They just have their way of peaking. And even when friends of mine who have used other coaches, and then I view their photos after contests, and I tell them, look, like you just weren't your best. Why didn't you say something? Why did you quote just trust the process when you know and could feel you weren't your best? And sometimes they'll say, well, I kind of did, but the coach said just basically shut up and do it anyway. And so some of those things are just obvious red flags. Like you should know that if you're a client that this is just not the best place to be. But you mentioned being on site with your light. That was another thing I saw early with you, is that you were going to a lot of contests, and it kind of grates at my soul a little bit because I'm just not somebody who would spend 40 or 50 weeks a year after working 60, 70 hours Monday through Friday, flying to venues to be with every single client. And I know you can't either. You can't be at 10 different shows on a weekend, but yet you, like other big name successful coaches, just made that a part of scaling a business. This is just what you do. You have to go where the people are. And I thought that was really smart on your part. And I'm curious if you still do that as much. Do you find the way to get to as many shows as possible?
Yeah, and one of our major reasons for moving to Vegas is there's so many shows out here. We were going out here a lot in general just to compete. So it's cool because now our athletes can come to us, and we really go over the top and giving our people an experience. A lot of times they stay with us. So we're doing real-time peaking, even seeing them cook their meals. So on a whole nother level, probably more so than most coaches are going, we're going. And we don't have any kids. So it is a really great experience for us to share our life and success with people.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant, and I think it's a great part. But I'll give you an example. Like one of my clients said, "Hey, will you come to my show?" I'm like, "Sure, but that would cost you two plane tickets and kind of a day rate to pay my expenses." Because if you look at what you've paid me for this prep, I would pay about 5 times that just to go to your show. But again, I realize in the sense of security and being with clients, that's just immeasurably a great benefit that a lot of coaches can offer. I would say to those of us who just can't do it that much or don't want to, um, when I was frequently, putting 15, 20, sometimes 30 clients in different contests every single weekend, just managing that was like being at NASA Command Central. I mean, I was never not on my phone for 12 to 16 hours every single Saturday. And to be on site often takes you away from other clients. And even for the clients that are on site with you, sometimes they're waiting and waiting and waiting until they can see you in real time. And yet you could have returned 5 or 6 sets of photos and communication back and forth. So just for those listening to us as competitors, keep in mind that's a pro and a con. Your coach doesn't have to be there to do extremely well. Matter of fact, you can probably get better, faster, information back and forth otherwise. But at the same time, it's a whole different set of pros versus cons when you've got somebody on site.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of major coaching differences, whether you're there or whether you're not, for sure.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think the role with specialization is now? Do you feel like you're so ingrained with a certain type of clientele that you just rather stay there, or do you feel like, hey, I'm doing great with males, females, physique, bodybuilding, whatever comes my way. I've been doing this long enough that I've got it all covered.
I mean, ideally, I would love to have someone come in without any problems or issues or health issues. And I do feel like I've unfortunately and fortunately gotten into the avenue where I am fixing a lot of other coaches' mess ups on, you know, what they did with a client that made their blood work flag so horribly, or, maybe did some really long preps or made girls lose their hair and weren't necessarily doing anything to help them get that back naturally, or even make the right moves that were causing those kinds of responses in the body. So I do have, I would say, a specialization for helping people get their health back on track after maybe some bad preps. It takes a lot more work and a lot more specialization on my end, but I'm willing to do it because ultimately it allows me to, one, fix somebody's health, but to give somebody a really great experience when they decide to compete again, and maybe be blown away by how little they had to do in terms of maybe PEDs or anabolics, or maybe they're still doing a lot of cardio, but they're only training 3 or 4 days a week versus doing like 3 hours of cardio and training 7 days a week. So kind of specializing in what I like to say is the hospice of dieting, where, it's still going to suck, but we're going to make it as gentle as possible. And yeah, I still have those high cardio clients, but the key is to make it not as high as maybe it would be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of go 50-50 on this one, in that I do think there's some advantage. I've got friends who coach, and they definitely specialize, that they will only take a certain kind of client. And, when that's what you have and that's what your eyes are trained on all the time, I think you do become a little better, or you stay up with every single little nuance with.
Get charged real quick.
Okay, no worries. So I think there's some value there, but also, again, with experience, you just end up, having the ability to help a lot of people. I want to switch with what you just said about client expectations, and the fact that you tend to attract a decent amount of people who are looking to fix some unfortunate problems that they may have caused with their health. I always am a little bit nervous when I take new clients, because we've not worked together. And so there are a lot of unknowns along the way, and they're typically expecting to be in better condition. And I've just never gone there with this particular person. And so to rush that process, I think, is a bad expectation for a client. But I'll give you an example of a brand new client I worked with just recently, competed last weekend. And, he had worked with a coach and sent me photos, and this is what we did. This was the result, but I know you're the guy, you can do this better. And my coach fully said, if you've got the opportunity to work with Joe, I mean, once in a lifetime thing, do it. And we had a good 3 or so month span between contests to make some dramatic improvements in his physique. And I mean, he went from a back of the pack kind of guy to literally like being the highlight of a couple classes. And he had a lot of the great qualities we needed. His physique was very, very good, but he didn't even know how good he could be in a sense of conditioning. And the whole peaking process was new to him. He had never done anything quite like I did it. And he said, man, I just did exactly what you said. I trusted the process, and I cannot believe how good I looked. Like I look at these photos from the stage and even getting judges' comments. And he said, I'm just stunned. I didn't know I could be this good. But I want to contrast that. I know that's a little self-congratulatory, to another client who had also worked with me for the first time. And I wasn't happy with the way peak week was going. I'm like, man, I feel like there's a couple things we need to keep pushing. And essentially he wasn't filling up like I wanted. And I kept having to add carbs, and I was a little worried, like maybe this is too much. Maybe this is too much. When it was all said and done, and he did fine, but he still just didn't look his best. And so I was like, man, I feel like I kind of blew this one. And then he said, Joe, I want to tell you, like, this is all on me. He said, I didn't do half of the things you told me during peak week. When I told you I was eating this, I was eating half the carbs because I was worried that it would be too much. And then you had me do this, and I didn't drink that much water and had me do this. And so here I am ripping my hair out, obviously, and just, fighting against the grain to help him come in, better. And when you're slinging decisions from a base of misinformation, you're not going to hit that target. So I wanted to contrast those because, Adam, I think the expectations of new coaching, everybody's out there marketing and messaging that they're the best coach, hire me, do this, do that. But on the shoulders of the competitor, to decide that this is a partnership. This is a unique aspect, I think, of modern coaching. This is not the beginnings that I described that were very technocratic. Here's the playbook, just do it. It's a lot of gathering information in real time and monitoring and assessing and making decisions based on change that's happening that day. And I think clients really need to understand that. And it's things are negotiable. You can tell me you don't agree with me. You can tell me you want to try something else. You tell me that your history indicates to you that maybe something a little different would be better. That's great. That's great information. Let's have that dialogue. But there is a lot of interplay that's necessary. And I'm curious, from your perspective, having coached for probably 15 years now, is that kind of communication process different today than it might have been 5 or 10 or 15 years ago?
I think the athletes are more knowledgeable, that they need someone who actually does work with them. And I think they catch on to the BS a lot quicker. I had a girl who did what we call See You Later Leaner Experience Weekend. She's an IFBB pro, and she got her pro card in 18. Actually, I think it was 17. But she said, I'd never had a coach who let me be a part of the process versus just telling me what to do. And it was so militant, and that was all I did. So, kudos to how I coach. That is what she likes about working with me, is she's like, I feel like I'm listened to, and the appropriate changes are made. Or I even have some say in, how things go, which she's a great athlete. She got her pro card. She obviously knows what she's doing, and she just needs an expert eye. But like you said, it really is a partnership. And I think a lot of times people are like, oh, well, my coach won't do that. And that is what really divides the relationship, because clients shouldn't be afraid to ask. I've had clients ask me for cheat meals, and it wasn't a hard no, but it's like a no at this time, because we maybe only have 6 weeks left of the prep, and maybe the answer is yes, but we might need to move your show date back, so it's not a hard yes or no all the time. You just have to work with people and explain why. And I think that's why my open call format is so valuable, because people can hear other people's questions and realize how communicative the process is and how customized it is. I think what we're doing is, again, just like we did with Peak Week many, many years ago, is starting a new revelation of how coaching is done.
Well, speaking of what coaches won't do, I'm going to put you on the hot seat for a second. In this has a little bit of an impetus in personal experience, in that one of my clients that I've worked with for a long time decided to change coaches, and I immediately saw her gaining tons of muscle, and could tell she was taking Anavar and just had gone that route. And you can see the masculinization in her face now and everything. The clear physique differences in strength are off the chart different. And the irony is, she had never even asked me, like, would you do that? Would you cross that bridge with me? And I think it's probably because she has heard me say it's not my forte. I don't push people. I work with plenty of enhanced athletes who use PEDs, but I simply tell them that's you. Like, you tell me what you're doing, what doses, when you're making changes, so I know. But it's still a scheduled illegal substance. I'm not a medical doctor, let alone an endocrinologist. I'm just not going to risk your health or my career by, overtly doing that. Totally fine with you doing it. And I can absolutely manage the nutrition and the peaking process. And I saw a position statement by 3DMJ. Eric Helms put out something like, here is why we don't work with enhanced athletes. Like, they don't even want to work with them. And I draw the line at, of course, I'll work with you. I'm just not going to mechanistically give you a prescription dose. Do this, don't do that. But I know you are somebody who's like, well, I've really researched this quite a bit, and I've got some experience. I've talked to a lot of people. I've worked even with medical professionals. So if I'm wrong, correct me, but you are somebody who's like, yeah, I'm okay telling people what's safe, what to do. Here's typical. Here's what you may need if you're going to go this route. Explain that to me.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it, but one, making sure their sourcing is legitimate, whether you have them go to a hormone clinic. But I also find, on the other hand, other coaches just send their clients to those clinics, and those clinics aren't always well versed in bodybuilding supplementation. So it's really important to have a good clinic that works with you and communicates well with your athletes. And then a big part of this for me is, like you said, the masculization. So show your face during your progress photos. Here's a list of the things to watch out for. I actually have my women do voice recordings for what I would say is more extreme supplementation, to make sure there's no deepening of the voice. And you can really watch for that, like, bi-weekly, and make sure that there's no change in the hertz of their voice. So that's something I'm really big on. And actually, one of my best athletes and I parted ways because of her wanting to take it too far, and I wasn't comfortable. You're a women's physique competitor, you're placing top 5. We're not quite winning, but you want to jump up a division. Like, you haven't even won your first women's physique pro show yet. And so she went the other way, and now she's doing a bunch of podcasts on how bodybuilding ruined her. And I don't want to say I told you so, but this is why I didn't go there, because you weren't an Andrea Shaw who was genetically gifted for that division. We were going to have to you weren't even winning women's physique. So why would we jump up a division? It just didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and so that's where I kind of see the end range of that category. There are people like 3DMJ who, not to put words in their mouth, but I think I read correctly that they just don't even work with enhanced athletes. People like me who will totally do that and be okay and understand enough to be, perfectly helpful. People like you who want to do it responsibly, and you keep people safe and you give them the knowledge, and you're fine even adding a little guidance. And then of course we have coaches, multiple coaches who have killed, literally manslaughter killed multiple clients, and they still walk freely, still doing the same things, the same protocols. So obviously I would avoid that camp if I were you guys listening in. But everybody else, just understand and maybe ask, here's what I'm interested in. Here's what I do. Are you okay with that? How much can you guide? Like, just get that communication on the table, because obviously with information being the way it is, you can learn a lot, and you can guide yourself, or using kind of open source information, and still be perfectly fine with a lot of good coaches.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
anything you think I missed here, Adam, that you think is great to add as just the current state of coaching, kind of a catch up to make sure clients and coaches are on the same page of what to expect with each other?
I think that was a really good, like, Cliff's notes. We could probably go even deeper into some of those topics, but I think this was really good.
Well, good. And I'm sure we will at some point. So thank you, Adam. Appreciate your expertise again, as always. And everybody watching, listening, thanks. We'll see you next time in Contest Prep University.